I'm on a mission to discover what the public really knows and thinks about the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. I've called in 3 interviewees that each represent part of the American public. A public school teacher originally from Los Angeles, California, who now teaches in Dallas, Texas, and represents the educators and the educated in our country. A retired resident of the Dallas, Texas area who represents the citizens old enough when the assassination happened to be able to comprehend what was going on. And finally, a 9-year-old from Las Vegas, Nevada, who represents a large portion of our country that has never studied the assassination and was not alive when it happened. Now, where were you when John F. Kennedy was assassinated?
I was living in New York. I was out in the yard, and my neighbor across the street called over and said, "Have you heard the president has been shot?" And I was very surprised and went into the house and watched television for about 3 days.
And Lee Tinkham had come in from a dental appointment, and he said, "They shot the president." And we thought, since Lee was a prankster, that he was just being insane. And then my best friend Dean Gerstein said, "Wait a minute." And we heard phones ringing up and down the hallway. And all the phones ringing at once. Mr. Caldwell answered the phone. His back was to us. He hung up the phone. He went to his chair and he put on his jacket. He never wears jacket in class. He turned and he faced us and very somberly said, "What Lee said was true. The President of the United States has been shot in Dallas, Texas."
Do you believe that the Warren Commission was correct and that it was actually a lone gunman and that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone?
I think it has been proven.
I didn't feel that way as a young man, as a student, as a young man, as a Californian. I didn't feel that way until I went to the 6th floor museum and I actually stood in that window. Having stood there, I began to think, gosh, one guy could do this.
So since you believe that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone, you believe in the magic bullet theory or the single bullet theory?
Would you explain that?
Well, the single bullet theory says that one bullet caused 6 separate wounds. That a bullet traveled from the book depository from Lee Harvey Oswald's gun into JFK's back, exiting out his neck, and then went into the Texas governor's back, who was sitting directly in front of him, through his back, lanced off his wrist, and then into his leg. Does that sound possible to you, that one bullet could cause 6 separate wounds like that?
It sounds like a lot, but from all I have read, and it seems as though he was the only shooter.
Does that sound probable to you?
Not really.
You thought it was a conspiracy. There's many different theories, you know. Shooter in the grassy knoll, CIA being behind it, the mob being behind it with Jack Ruby, it being a communist plot. What did you think was...
2 separate communist plots. The Russians were behind it and the Castro was behind it.
And the Castro was behind it,
yeah,
right.
2 separate communist plots, yeah. My favorite, and the one that I hung on to for the longest time, was the CIA, and that John Kennedy himself, dying of spinal cancer, ordered his own hit because he was being an ineffectual president, and he wanted to leave a legacy, and he wanted his agenda to go through as a martyr.
You believe that JFK ordered his own hit through the CIA?
Believed, past tense.
Interesting. And what ideas made you think that that was possible?
Looking at the photographs of John Kennedy, his progression in his presidency, the slimness of the man, the obvious use of cortisone to remove the pain in his back, the change in skin color and tonality, his increasing lack of mobility in dealing with his children. All those things made me think that, this was becoming a sick man. Plus the fact, again, in terms of his domestic policy, in terms of his foreign policy, although he had the success of the Cuban Missile Crisis, he was being rather, and loved, by the way. I mean, where they threw rocks at Nixon in Brazil, they were throwing flowers at Kennedy. When he went to Europe, he was besieged by mobs of people, adoring fans, but still, as a president, very, very ineffectual. And because of his family, he wanted to be transformational. He couldn't do that. The only way to make that happen would be his own martyrdom. That was my feeling as a young Californian.
Even a 9-year-old can see that there's something suspicious about the John F. Kennedy assassination. I do believe it was a cover-up, but I don't think it's possible for me to determine who's behind the cover-up until all the facts are released. In conclusion, I think the Warren report is wrong. I don't think Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone.